I'm going to welcome everybody tonight to the first installment of our Careers for Writers Alumni Panelist series that the English department at Furman is putting on for its students. There's going to be a number of these throughout the year, so please look for more, and they'll always be under the Careers for Writers rubric, so pay attention to that. Our next one will be in January. But this evening, I am very excited to introduce to you three people who are broadly in what I was calling digital content creation. I want to thank Melanie Armstrong, first of all, for really setting this whole thing up. Melanie's in the alumni office, and Alex Ricciuti and Lauren Payne from the Malone Center for Career Engagement. I cannot do this by myself, and they're here to help me. So I want to just say hi to all my lovely former students, and I'm so pleased to introduce you to our current students. So all I'm going to do is just say one tiny thing about each of you, and then let you really talk about your vocational path. I think the most important thing is for the students to hear the day I left Furman, what was I thinking, what did I do, that got me kind of where I am now. So good choices, bad choices, whatever you did. So let me just say first, and we're going to take these in alphabetical order, very arbitrarily. So Sarah Hamilton is the Senior Programs Communication Manager at Smile Train in Brooklyn. This is also a nationwide Zoom panel, students. Sarah has been with Smile Train for 2.5 years, and she graduated from Furman with an English degree in 2012. Haley Overcast is the Senior Communication Specialist at Bonheur Children's Hospital in Memphis. She has been there for 3.5 years. She graduated from Furman in 2011, also with a double major in Spanish. And yes, thank you for doing that, Lauren. Viewers, if you could put something in the Q&A if you have a question, and then I will make sure that gets conveyed to our panelists. Chrissy Reinemund is the Senior Content Manager at Form in Denver, although that is apparently quite an international company from what I could see. They're based in Massachusetts, are they not, Chrissy?
Yep.
Okay. Chrissy has been with them for 9 months, but she's been working in Denver since she graduated in 2015, and she graduated from Furman with an English degree. So, so the Furman students see you where you are now, but they need to know how you got there. So Haley, I'm going to give you about 10 or 15 minutes to tell us your story, then each of the other ladies, and then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for some more questions. So take it away, Haley, and I will mute myself unless you need something.
It sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to get to be here to talk to some Furman students, and thank you guys for coming. I know from experience how very busy you are, so thanks for taking this time. So like Dr. Oakes said, I graduated from Furman with a double major in English and Spanish, which basically meant I had 2 English degrees, just one was in another language. So when I graduated, I really didn't have any idea what I wanted to do, to be honest. And I didn't have a really great grasp of how my English skills would translate and really be practically useful in the real world in a career. When I first left, I thought I wanted to go into the arts. So I had an internship in Greenville at Carolina Ballet, came back to Memphis after graduation, which is where I'm from, and did another internship in an arts organization. But when it came time to get a full-time job with benefits, I ended up taking a job in marketing at a local bank here in Memphis. And that ended up being a good move for me in a couple particular ways. Didn't ever anticipate seeing myself in that position, but it gave me a very broad view of what marketing is, what communications is. It was a small organization, so I got like little bites of everything. And because of that broad view, it was confirmed that, oh, what I really love to do is writing. If I didn't do that for 4 years in college, yes, you still want to do that. So what I started doing then was kind of exploring, like I bet some of you are now, is what does that look like practically to make a career as a writer? What I started doing is freelancing. I focused on building my portfolio. I had very academic writing from undergrad, obviously, but I had very finance focused writing from my job at the bank. So I started working on building my portfolio as wide as I could in terms of subject matter, in terms of types of content that I was writing, whether it's social, blog posts, long form articles, or whatever. So then when this job at Bonheur came up, I was drawn to it for several reasons. Number one, I enjoy working with children. And so it was something I could be passionate about. And number two, it was really presented to me as a writing position, which I feel like not all communications positions are necessarily presented that way, but that's what they are, honestly. And throughout my limited career, what I've really learned is that writing is a skill. I was talking to my boss about this, that I was doing this tonight, and she was like, I really consider what we do to be a craft. Some people are naturally talented at it, but you do have to work at it and hone it. And I think I was pretty surprised how unusual it is to be able to communicate clearly and succinctly in the business world, that I had people asking me to read their emails for them. I was like, that's not my job, not at my current job, at my other jobs. So, if you take nothing else from this, I would say that writing is a skill and not everyone has it, and it's desperately needed. Y'all, this weekend I went to Moe's, got a cup of queso. There was a grammar error in the copy on the queso, and it made my eye twitch. And I was like, did nobody copy edit this? So anyways, just saying that the English major has, and humanities in general, I think sometimes people can feel like they didn't come away with a practical skill, but you really did, and it's really desperately needed. And being a writer gives you the ability to understand, to condense, to express ideas, no matter the subject. I do not have a science background, and that's really what I do now. So I kind of thought I would go into some of the content that I work on now, if that's okay with you guys. So I'm going to share my screen. Hang on. Like I said when we were talking, I've been doing this for 18 months, and every time I have to figure out where to do it. Okay, here we go. Share. All right, are you guys seeing Bonheur Children's Hospital? Perfect. Okay. There we go. So Bonheur Children's, just briefly about us, Memphis, Tennessee. We're a top nationally ranked hospital, and we care for kids that come in with a broken arm from Memphis, and we care for kids that come here with epilepsy from around the country and around the world. I'm a senior communications specialist, and I do physician-facing communication in particular, which means anything that goes to our physicians, our regional referrers, as well as our national specialists that we send to. And I also meant to say that, yes, the Furman type A never leaves you. I did create a PowerPoint for this presentation, so I'll always be type A like that. So anyways, the digital content that is a part of my job is really stories and articles, video, web content, and social media. And I'm going to try to briefly run through some examples of what I've done, because I get really excited about these stories and the patients. So I'll try not to get too into the details. Like, for example, this little sweet angel here is Harrison, and he's going to be our 50th heart transplant. He's been in the hospital for 124 days waiting for his little heart. So he was a precious little angel. All right, so there's 3 publications that I'm in charge of. I don't write everything for them, and they are printed because print is not dead, believe it or not. But we share all of that content that I create or my freelancers create across all our digital platforms that you can see there. And then this little girl is Lyric, and she was our first ever heart transplant. And this is on the day that she was celebrating the 5th anniversary of her heart transplant. So she got it when she was 20 months old, and now she's 6, and she was a hoot. All right, so anyways, one of the kind of big pieces of my job is writing about patients and their outcomes and stories. All of this is used as digital content. I just chose the magazine articles because I think they look nicer for this. But this is Cooper Kilburn. He was born without an airway, and he depended on a trach when he was 2 years old. that doctor on the right, Dr. Thompson, decided to create an airway for him. So for this story, it was really fun in a lot of ways and really hard in some ways, but to get to follow these patients, get to know the family, get to be in the operating room with the doctors, and have to really synthesize and think about what's important to the physicians that I'm writing to, but also synthesize this information coming from the family and the physicians and everybody involved in this process. I also write about some of the innovation that we do. It's really important for us with our content that everything that we put out is useful in some way, that it's not just a glorified brochure is what we talk about. So everything I write needs to have a purpose behind it. And so this is about our outpatient VAD program. And this was when kids get a VAD is a device that circulates your blood through your body when your heart fails. Previously, these kids would have to stay in the hospital as long as they had the VAD, which you could wait for a heart for a year. But now we have a program where we can send them home with the VAD. And this is just Sean. He's 16. He was the first one to ever do that. And this was also a really fun piece to write. They're not all fun. I chose only the fun ones to show you guys because I got to work with the family and learn about the device and learn about the process and work with the coordinators and all the people that really make this happen for these kids, and figure out how to tell that story to this physician audience, to the cardiologists who might be looking to implement something like that at their children's hospital. It wouldn't be 2021 if I didn't talk about COVID for like half a second. I won't linger on it, I promise. But this was just a story that we did, that I did about the impact of COVID on children's health, and not really the disease itself, although we have seen some kids getting really sick in our hospital, but more about the impacts from the pandemic itself. For example, that little girl on the front cover came in with a gunshot wound. We saw gunshot wounds skyrocket during the pandemic. She was fine, thank goodness. But that was a hard article to write, but it was really interesting, and it required it really felt honestly like writing a research paper, because I was combining all these sources from a bunch of different doctors and hearing their perspectives and talking to patients and blah, 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 blah. All right, so I also do research. These are just two pieces that I've written recently on subjects that are important to us in the hospital. We partner with St. Jude. A lot of our attendings go over there to take care of patients who's, like for this doctor, it was her, she takes care of kids whose kidneys are damaged because of cancer treatment. And then the next piece of content, I want to make sure to show you guys it's not all writing for publication. I mean, a good chunk of it is for me, but there's also a need for storytelling and for communication through other channels. So during the pandemic, we relied on video a lot because we couldn't have people coming in the hospital. We couldn't have prospective fellows come or prospective residents. And so I don't film or edit video, but I do work with the producer to make sure we're telling the story that we want to tell to the audience that we want to tell it to. So this was a piece for our cardiology fellowship program. And then this was a video that I did do all of this one, but it was mostly like photos and things telling patient stories. So videos are kind of fun because sometimes I'm writing a script, like literally creating a script, but a lot of the times it's just how to fashion that final product. And so we use these on our website, on our social channels, all kinds of spaces. Also, a piece of digital content for me is writing for the website. And you also have to be, I know some people go on websites and it seems like anybody can write a web page, which anybody could, but writing a good web page takes skill and understanding SEO, search engine optimization, writing within the constraints of that. And writing for a particular audience. This is a page that I worked on during COVID. specifically for our providers, creating a landing page for resources for them. But then I also work on patient-facing side on the website some. And this is for our Infantile Epilepsy Center. And for our patient-facing, we write at a middle school, or we try to write at a middle school level, because we get all kinds of parents and people on our website. So yeah, writing within the constraints of it, not the constraints of SEO, but it's important to be able to write succinctly, but also write in a way that's going to draw visitors and push them to the action that you want to take. And then the last thing that I do is some social media content. I work on the platforms where we're most likely to engage with physicians, which for us is LinkedIn, where I create the content calendars for that. And then I also work with the platform Doximity, which is like Facebook for doctors. I don't like that phrase, but that's the best I got. But we also promote our content on their channels as well, because this Doximity is where physicians vote for the US News rankings. So with social, that's a whole other beast too, because you are, even if you don't have a character limit like LinkedIn, you're constrained and you have limited space to say what you're going to say. So those are the pieces, the big pieces of what I do. I hope that wasn't too much. But the last kind of thing that I would just say before I hand it over is that the need for writers is wider than I thought, and maybe wider than you think. In the past 6 weeks, probably, I've been contacted by 2 people, one at UT's med school here in Memphis and one at St. Jude looking for science writers, and they are struggling to find them. So there's definitely opportunities out there for great Furman English majors. Okay, so I'm sorry I probably talked way too long, but yeah, that's it.
Really, you do a lot, and that last bit of information is really important for them to know too.
Absolutely.
Okay, Sarah, I'm just going to go straight to you. Take it over.
Thank you. So I will flip what Haley just spoke about a little bit and start with my current role now and the work that I do, and then how I kind of worked my way here. So like Haley, the day after I graduated from Furman, I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do beyond the fact that I knew I liked to write. So I was fortunate in that I was able to get a job with an SEO firm in Greenville, and that's Search Engine Optimization, a digital content marketing firm called Veritas Group. And so I worked there for about a year, and I got experience in SEO and HTML and writing digital content in general. And so, wait, I just realized I did not start with my current role. Let me backtrack a little bit. Speaking is also important when it comes to skills. So as Dr. Oakes mentioned, I'm the Senior Programs Communications Manager for SmileTrain. SmileTrain is an international nonprofit that partners with local medical professionals around the world and provides them with funding and training to provide surgery for cleft lip and palate. So on the content side of that, I serve as a bridge between our programs team, who's the team leading the work our partners are doing on the ground, and then the other departments in our organization, including our communications team. On a day-to-day basis, that includes creating and reviewing content for a lot of different platforms, our website, our social media channels, op-eds, talking points for speaking opportunities, emails to our supporters, to our partners, and to our patients, and putting together medical webinars and webinars with our partners. So I've been able to visit a lot of our international partners to work on collecting content with them, and it's just been really amazing to understand what they do, and then also meet the families and the patients that we're serving and get to hear, their stories firsthand. But now to backtrack to day after Furman, no idea what I wanted to do. I started working at Veritas and gained a lot of great experience there. And I also began looking around and seeing what other people were doing and what jobs I might like to move to from there. So I stalked a lot of LinkedIn's, and I decided that nonprofit communications looked like a really interesting field. There was a lot of opportunity to write stories in kind of a narrative way, and then also to serve, a noble purpose in writing and change lives. So I decided to seek out an internship and then go to graduate school. I got an internship with an organization called SOS Children's Villages in Washington, D.C. And there I learned a lot about the actual process of content creation. I continued working with website content, and I learned social media, including actual platforms that people use like Hootsuite and Sprout, and I got experience with those. And I also learned about working with international teams to collect content and develop it from there for different audiences. And since I wanted more background, I loved the international aspect of it, especially, and I decided I would go to graduate school to focus on international nonprofit communications. So I went to a graduate school in Denver, and I got my degree there. And once I graduated from there, I had about 6 months of job hunting. I had a lot of jobs that included dog walking, concert security, that type of thing, while I applied to a lot of different communications roles. So I got lucky. I applied to a job for a surgical advocacy organization called the G4 Alliance for a communications officer position. And the interview went well, things clicked, and I began working with them. I was the only communications person in that organization. So I, again, kind of got experience in every channel and every platform across digital marketing. And I also began doing international event planning for some of the advocacy work that we were doing with the UN General Assembly and the World Health Assembly. So it was through the G4 Alliance that I became familiar with Smile Train, the organization where I currently work. I began working with them since they were a member of the G4 Alliance, got familiar with their work, met their teams, and when they posted a job in communications, I applied and began working with them. So it's very easy to kind of look back at this and tell this as a story of like, this happened and this happened and this happened, but you're not seeing all the points where I had absolutely no idea that what I was doing was the right thing to do, or what exactly I wanted to do, or just the overall kind of frustration and uncertainty with the whole process, which I know a lot of you are probably familiar with right now. So there were a lot of things that I would do differently in retrospect. I wrote out kind of what helped at each stage, and then what could have been a disaster and what I would change. So in retrospect, I think at each job, I was able to kind of gain skills and build on the previous role, and that opened up new opportunities. What could have been a disaster, while seeking an internship in DC, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't ask the organization I was interning at if they were hiring for the role, if they hired interns once their internship was complete. And I didn't really consider whether the role I was taking justified the cost, or whether I could look, closer to home and say, is there something here that would give me the same outcome? And then when it comes to graduate school, I knew that I wanted an international role, but I didn't know that much about graduate school. A lot of my classmates when I got there, they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they had already worked in roles where graduate school was kind of the next step for them to advance. Whereas I was just there with a vague sense that I wanted to work in international nonprofits. And I also didn't really understand in the same way they did how to maximize the impact of my time there. So I guess overall my message is there's a lot of missteps you can take. And there's a lot of things that you should look into carefully and consider before you do them. But ultimately, it's okay to not have an exact idea of the path that you're going on. And as long as you are building skills and connections and you continue applying and just trying things that you want to do, you can end up in a role that you didn't previously know existed. I had never heard of, advocacy communications before I started with the G4 Alliance. And that led to this incredible role that I really love right now. So that is my overall message.
It's a great message. I mean, yeah, I'm sure everybody in life, at least I hope we go through life saying, gee, I was so dumb back then, because that means you learned something since then, right? So we all have to have that experience. But hopefully, some of what you're saying can make them more aware that you might be asking those questions.
Mhm.
Okay, Chrissy, take it away. So, Chrissy is our far flung member of the panel from Denver.
Hello. Yes, far flung. That's me. I'm Chrissy. I graduated in 2015, and I am really honored to be a panelist today. And I really want to thank Dr. Oakes for thinking to put this on. I would have killed to have something like this when I was a student, because I'm sure, as all of you are feeling right now, it's confusing, it's scary, and kudos to Dr. Oakes for making it feel a little bit less scary. And I hope you all feel a little less scared after this event. You could do it. So, about me. I'm Chrissy. I live in the mountains of Colorado, a little bit outside Denver. I am the senior manager of content marketing at a software company called Form. Dr. Oakes mentioned this quickly, but we are a global company. We have about 300 employees across the globe. So I'm in Denver, but we're based in Boston. We have some employees in Ukraine and London and France. So we're a little bit all over the place, and we're growing, which is always a good sign of a company. So before I go into the company, what I do, what my role is, I want to take us all back into the magical land of college, which feels like 30 years ago, but it really wasn't that far away when I think about it now. Back to when I was an English major who had no idea what I was going to do. The only thing I did know, which sounds like a similarity with the other people here, is that I knew I loved to write. I knew I wanted to write. I just had no idea what that looked like. And writing was something that I always loved to do. And in high school and as a kid, I did all of those stereotypical things that you associate with writers. I read a lot. I went to creative writing camps. I hated science and math classes, like all of these things that you associate with a closet, introvert writer. That was me. And I thought a lot about the career path that I wanted to take. And unfortunately, when you're growing up and you're taking English classes, you feel really limited in the careers you can have, because you grow up writing these long-winded essays and reading Beowulf and Canterbury Tales, and you're like, what do I do with this? How is this helpful in my career? And so there's a limited path in your mind. You're like, okay, so I have to be an author, I have to be a poet, I have to be a teacher. Spoiler, I am not any of those things. We will get to what I am doing, but that's a little background on how I thought I would end up. I'm like, okay, these are my choices. I can make it work. But I came into college as a freshman knowing nothing about what I wanted to do, and feeling scared. So that's where we are. And I will always remember this turning point that happened my freshman year in a class with a professor who I love. I love Dr. Oakes, but I also loved Dr. Braun, who was an amazing lady. Her courses were some of the very, very best that I took when I was at Furman. And I remember submitting an essay. Don't remember what it was about. Don't remember what the class was, but I just remember seeing this little note at the top of the paper when I got it back. And it said, have you considered copywriting as a career? And I had never heard that before. I didn't even know what copywriting was. I didn't really know what a marketing team was. And so immediately when I read that, I'm like, huh. And so I Google copywriting. What does a copywriter do? And it's like this light bulb went off in my mind. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this magical unicorn job where I can be a writer? I can be creative, but I don't have to write novels, and it pays well. This sounds amazing. And so I was very lucky to have that guidance my freshman year. And I'm sure Dr. Braun doesn't even remember this, but I remember it vividly. And so that was the moment where I was like, I want to be a copywriter in marketing. And that was it. I made up my mind. So my junior year of college at Furman, I landed an internship at Irwin Penland, which is this amazing agency in downtown Greenville, but they also have an office in New York. I came on as a copywriting intern, but I also helped out the account management team with social posts and digital campaigns. And that was really my first introduction into copywriting and marketing, but also into agencies. And so people like to say this about agencies, like once you're in, you don't really get out. And that was kind of the case with me. So once I graduated, my mind was just set on like, I need to go to an agency, and they're amazing. Highly recommend. They're a great introduction into marketing because you get to see like how these small teams all work together toward one goal. And you all wear a lot of different hats, which a lot of people see as a negative. But for me, it was like I could step foot into account management. I could see how the SEO team was doing. I could look at creative. And you can also like sit in and sit with these teams and figure out if you want to do something different than what you're doing. So agencies, if you're interested in that, look into it for sure. But I started off working at an agency in Boulder, Colorado, moved out here, again, having no idea what I was going to do, but my brother lived in Denver. I lived in his basement for like 6 months until I found a job. But I trusted myself enough to know that like, I want to write, I'm going to write, I will be a copywriter, and eventually got a job at an agency. So I was there for about 2 years and then transferred out of that into the brand side of things. And then eventually made my way into where I am now, or the space that I'm in now, which is B2B SaaS, which sounds very confusing, but it's business to business software as a service. So this was another huge light bulb moment in my career where I was moving away from the really classic copywriter that you guys are probably thinking of, like B2C, business to consumer copywriting. So you see Instagram ads, you see billboards, you're seeing commercials, and you're selling a product that's very basic, maybe a one-time purchase, and moving away from that fluffy, fun copywriting into like very business-driven, results-driven copywriting that I'm doing now. So the way that I would like to explain this that hopefully makes sense before I show you what I'm writing and how this works. If you think about B2C marketing as like a pair of socks, like you get an Instagram ad, you see this pair of socks, you're really interested in it. It could be an impulsive purchase. You make it one time and that's it. And like your goal as a marketer is pretty much done. If you're lucky, you'll become a loyal customer, but like that's it. B2B marketing, if you think of it in the way that we work, is we are becoming a software partner for these people. So our customers are spending upwards of $1 million on a tech partnership with us. So if you're comparing a $10 pair of socks to a $1 million tech partnership, it's like your goal as a marketer and your goal as a writer completely shifts, and you become much more of a storyteller in a long form way because you have to sell them on a product that they're going to work on with you for a long time, if that makes sense. So I want to walk us through a little bit about how that works. So I'm going to share my screen. Same thing here. I always forget where this is. Okay. That's not the right size. Okay. So I don't want to get too technical and I don't want to get too buzzwordy, but just so you guys understand a little bit about like B2B software. So the way that this works is we operate in what's called a lead cycle. So we, from a very high level, these people come in the very far end of the cycle without knowing anything about who we are, what we do. They don't even know if they need us as a partner. And then they make their way through that cycle, down the funnel, if you will, until they are a customer. So my job as a content writer is to guide them through that cycle and through these different paths. So the very first piece of the cycle is usually an ad, and through that ad, they might land on our website. And this is our website, welcome to forum.com. So this is a huge project of mine that I completed this year. We went through a rebrand and I rewrote the entire website. So that was our homepage. It was over 40 pages of solutions, of resources, our capabilities pages, different products. And like we heard earlier, it was a huge strategy problem to try and work within the limitations of SEO, but also trying to tell a story and sell a product at the same time. It's hard work, but we finally did it, and this is the result. So we work on what's called an H1 at the top here to really sell someone on a product when they first land, and then we try to guide them through the page and through our entire site to hopefully get them to click on this button right here. Let's chat. And I'm moving really slowly. But I'm not going to go through all these pages, but I just want to give you an idea of what kind of work I do. So someone might know that they want a compliance solution, so they can go to our compliance page. And we're all doing the same thing on each of these pages, right? We're trying to sell our product, but we're showing it in different lights in different industries and how it can be used in different ways and flexed. And that's how your copy changes. So here's an example of a use case page. And then I want to show you how, I know this probably looks really boring, not fun at all, but we do try to bring a little bit of personality, a little bit of creativity into what we do. And our team is really passionate about that. So even though we are field management software and we create mobile forms, we do want to feel like we're empowering the people that we're giving these forms to. So we want to give like kind of a superhero feeling. We want to make it a little more fun than your average software platform. So coming up with fun ways to give rhythm and breathe life into otherwise boring concepts like compliance, which is where your creative writing skills come in. So goodbye, failure to comply, which is what I love. Like it sounds a little bit more fun, even though we're talking about safety. It's creative. So people might spend a little bit more time on our web pages, but if they want, and if they're extra interested and they're further along in the lead cycle, they might go to our resources page. And here's another example of what I do. So a huge part of my job is writing case studies, which means I get up close and personal with our customers. I figure out what their story is, and I get to tell that story. So I understand their company, their industry, how they're using our product, what kind of benefits they're seeing, and then I turn that into a piece like this, which sells our product in a relatable way for our sales team, which is a huge asset for them if they have a prospect coming in who has the exact same use case that they're looking for, they're in the exact same industry. This story is a huge asset for them because they can sell the product more effectively because it's the story they're looking for. So an example of a case study here. And then another resource that I love are our white papers. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with these. They bring me back to my English days, but they're very research-heavy, dense papers. Very similar to writing an essay in an English class. And they're not directly promoting our product, but which might sound counterintuitive, but if you think about it psychologically, in these papers, we're writing about a topic that our customers have expressed interest in, that we very lightly relate to, but we're creating trust and we're positioning ourselves as a thought leader and as an expert in this topic. And in marketing, if you create trust, that leads to a sale eventually. So this is our strategy here. So this one was one I wrote on ethical AI, which I loved. It was a beast, but these are huge learning opportunities for me. I get to just dig into a topic and read a lot of stats, learn about Siri and Cortana and all this fun stuff, which I love. So on top of all this stuff, this is just a taste. With all of this comes marketing emails, new product emails, social posts, blog posts, press releases, contributed articles, everything that's like writing or voice and tone related is my job. So I'm never bored and I'm always writing, which is exactly how I want it. And it's how I've always envisioned it. And I feel really lucky to be where I feel like I need to be. And I'm excited to see what's next. So that's me.
Thank you so much. Okay, I have some questions, but we have a question in the Q&A, so I'll let the students go first. Someone has asked, what is the most rewarding thing about your job, and what is the thing you enjoy the most? If you haven't highlighted that kind of thing already, or add something else to that.
I can go. I think one of the things that makes the position that I'm in rewarding, honestly, is the time that it took me to get there. We talked some about, different people have talked about the path that we took to get there. So I have a deep appreciation for the position I hold now. But also, it is really rewarding when I finish a story. There's two pieces. Number one, it's really rewarding to follow a family and them trust me to tell their story. Like I don't know. Sometimes I just say, why are these people like letting me come into their house sometimes and meet their kids and hang out with them. And I don't know, that's not every family, but trusting me with their story. And that's really rewarding to me. And getting to give the I know I'm not really even, my job is really for other physicians, but being able to show the families the final product of the story that we told, that's really rewarding to me. And honestly, like the process of writing is I don't know if rewarding is the right word, but that's why I got into it. So if that starts being old, then I need to go somewhere else. So I really do enjoy that day-to-day work of it too.
My answer might be too similar to be interesting, but it's definitely those patient stories. I am not exaggerating when I say I cry about once a week just reading the stories. And when you get the opportunity to meet the people who are behind those stories, and then try to create the emotion you feel meeting them for other people, it's incredible. I mean, just it's such a wonderful opportunity.
Guess it's my turn. um, well, I guess I should give some background before answering this question. But when I started out at an agency in Boulder, I was not initially a writer. I was an account manager, and then I moved into an account supervisor position. So I was managing client relationships at the agency aside from doing the creative process. Um, and I made a very conscious choice to move away from that and into writing. And I remember when I changed a role, my old boss told me when he looked at my resume, he was like, "Are you sure you want to say that you're a writer and not an account manager? Like, are you sure you want to step down?" And I'm like, "Am I stepping down?" I I'm doing what I want to do. I'm moving away from, you know, dealing with horrible clients and not feeling fulfilled into a job where I feel like I'm expressing myself creatively and I'm doing what I want to do. But in his mind, it was like, really? And I think a lot of people feel that way about creative roles, especially with writing, is like, oh, um, compared to an account manager versus a creative writer, it's like that's not as important, which is totally false. Like that's complete bullshit. And I'm sorry that I cussed, but like it really is. It's not true. So I would say the most rewarding part of my career is like loving something and confidently doing it and knowing that it's what you want to do and not listening to the haters, just don't give in.
Maybe as Haley said, those people think it's really easy and not worth doing unless they have to do it themselves. Then they need Haley to read their emails.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So we had a couple other questions. And I guess it could apply to any one of you, but what kind of deadlines do you have when you're given an assignment? Like those research projects, Chrissy, seem like they take a long time. And, Haley, you have to deal with, making appointments with families and do things come out periodically for you? And, Sarah, I think we're in all three different situations with the issue of a timeline or a deadline. So maybe let's just keep going in alphabetical order and we can answer that kind of question if that's okay.
Sounds good to me. My deadlines are very varied. Some stories can take a really long time. For example, the first one I talked about with Cooper, the child that had his airway, I followed that family for a long time. And it was probably a couple months before I actually published a story. The good and bad thing is that I make my own deadlines for the, for the publications, but I try to do like each of them 3 times a year, basically. Anyways, but then sometimes, like with COVID especially, there's content that has to be done sometimes that day. And it can be, we need a blog post, like the COVID vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds got approved today. So tomorrow's going to be a super fun day at work. No, it'll be great. But literally this afternoon, we were like, we've got a blog post, what doctor can approve it from a medical standpoint. So it kind of depends on what it is. So it's very, very wide ranging, but it is fun to have those ones that I can like sink my teeth into.
Sarah, how about you?
So I will echo that and say that stories can take such an incredibly long time to develop, especially when you are telling a story of a patient over time. When it comes to cleft lip and palate specifically, the stories that we've found perform best are the ones that include a before photo of a child and then an after photo of a child, which is a process of months to get. And then in a lot of the countries where we have programs, you're working in somewhere like the DRC, where you have to find a vendor and then they have to return to this place that is terribly inconvenient to reach. So it's a lot of different timelines depending on what it is. Video takes even longer. And then, yeah, I'd say for depending on what the story is, it can just vary so much. But I think the important thing to always keep in mind is that if you are the person who can estimate a timeline and who can say, well, we need to define at what point we share this on social, at what point we share this on the website, when it can become an email, you will become one of the most valuable people on the team, because that's something that surprisingly is really easy to lose sight of when you're in an organization that has so many priorities and so many projects at once. So whatever the deadlines are within the industry and organization where you end up, it's just important to be the one to recognize that you have to set those and define them in advance.
So time management is important on your job, just
and
like
project management. If you can develop those skills, those will help you in any position.
Yeah. And Chrissy, I'm just thinking that research must take you a long time.
Yeah, it does. I would say for us, it depends on how many dependencies we have, similar to you guys. Like if it's a case study with a customer, usually those approvals and reviews with the customer take a long time. With white papers, I'd say those are usually like 6 weeks. So I'll do the writing and the research for the first 2 weeks, and then we'll pass it off to a designer, and then they'll do the design. And then we have a lot of internal team reviews. But for us, we usually get backlogged with opportunities that come in, and those come in a lot. So if we have this huge opportunity and a huge sales opportunity that comes in, we usually have these projects that just pop up out of nowhere. Like we have a landing page or we have a one page that we need to work on, and those will automatically take priority. And that's usually like a 1-day turnaround. So it just depends on how busy and how high priority our projects are.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, the nitty-gritty question. How do they find these jobs? How do they search for them? What do they look for? And part of the issue is I think that it's so broad, right? And so many different industries. I think it's confusing for students to know where to start.
Yes, that is a tough question. I can just tell you what it was like for me and how I found my position. I think I knew I wanted to stay in Memphis. That's where my family was. So I was able to narrow by location, because it can be super overwhelming if you're looking nationwide. And what was most helpful for me is, yes, I perused the job boards. LinkedIn has great places where people post positions. Follow certain companies that you may like. Agencies, as Chrissy already said, is a great place to get started with writing experience. But for me, it was meeting with people. I met with so many people just to meet them. Like I wasn't asking for a job. I was just saying, hey, I'd love to meet you and just talk to you about what you do. And what ended up happening is someone that I met with worked with my current boss. And when that job came up, I had that kind of like, hey, remember me? I still had to apply. I still had to prove myself. I still had to show that I could do the work. And the person before me had been fired, so I had to prove it double, apparently. But anyways, so I know that's not a fun answer, but that's how it came about for me. And like, I'm always happy to meet with any firm and folks just to talk to you further about what I do or keep my ears open for anything coming around. So sorry, I was a little long-winded.
I've been extolling to them loudly and often the virtue of informational interviews.
Yes.
So thank you for affirming that. Okay,
Yes.
Sarah, what do you think?
So I would say for multiple roles, I have been fortunate in that people in my network referred me to those jobs. Not to give her too many people knocking on her office door, but for the role at Veritas, Dr. Shackelford told me, there's a role at Veritas, you should apply for that. And as Haley said, still had to apply, still had to go through the interview, but it was a really valuable first step. And then, as I said, with my current role with Smile Train, I actually met the person I worked for at Smile Train through G4 and developed that relationship before I even knew that they would be hiring. Then I would also say, as Dr. Oak said, informational interviews. Now that I'm kind of on the other side of it and interviewing people and filling roles within our organization, if someone came to me and said, I would love to have an informational interview with you about what your organization is doing and what you're looking for in the future, that is absolutely something we would do that would stand out when we were hiring for that role later.
Good to know. Okay, before Chrissy says something, I just want to say I'm sitting in my office right now and I can see you in this chair. I can see you in the chair in front of me. It's so wonderful.
Wait.
Yeah, because it's so funny because where you are is right in front of the chair where you would sit. A lovely memory. Okay, go ahead. That's all the nostalgic stuff I'm going to say. Okay.
Making me tear up. I would echo everything that they just said. I would also add, if you know where you're going to go locally, there are some really nice local job listing sites. Like in Denver, there's what they call Andrew Hudson's job list. And I remember that when I was looking for my first job. And he kind of like weeds out all the bad ones and just puts in the ones that you might want to be interested in for good companies, which I really appreciated. Another thing that isn't directly related to where you find them, but how you apply for them, I think this is super important, especially when you're coming in with very little experience. Like, do your due diligence in applying for that job. If they ask for a cover letter, submit a cover letter. If they put in extra questions, even if they're not required, like show that you're putting in the effort to apply for the job instead of just doing the automatic LinkedIn application thing. Because I can't tell you, we're interviewing for a content specialist right now, and we just immediately kick those guys out. It's like, they don't look like they want the job, so why would we want them? So do as much work for them as you'd want them to do for you, and that's probably going to pay off.
That is great advice. Okay, so you all are doing things that have a high degree of content that is something that you did not learn at Furman. And I have to say, I did a lot of reading on your websites over the weekend, and just because I'm a human being, I have some clue about what Haley and Sarah's organizations do. And Chrissy, honey, no words made sense to me at all. So my question to you is, what was how much was expected? How much did they expect you to know when you came in? And how do you talk about that interview? And then what's your kind of learning curve when you get in the job, and is that okay? So, I think a lot of students are like, I don't know anything about this. And I'm wondering, how much do you need to know about it, whatever it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we can have a separate Zoom call about what our company does. That's a really good question. And I came in to software when I was a little bit later in my career. I think I would have been much more intimidated by these roles if I was coming in fresh out of college. But I came in I didn't start at Form. I started at Ratio. It's a horrible name, but they do smart sprinkler controllers, which sounds just as boring as what I do now. But I came in to Ratio from a restaurant company. So I was doing B2C marketing, moving to B2B SaaS. And I wrote a cover letter for Ratio, and I can't remember how exactly I started it, but I was like, it's no secret sprinklers are boring. And basically the cover letter was about like how writing can make sprinklers not be boring. And so I didn't know anything about how the product worked. I didn't know the hardware. I really didn't know much of anything, but I was like, if I can distill this down into the most basic form of what it is, it's a sprinkler, then I can get my foot in the door. And they loved it. But to answer your question more succinctly, they are so patient with you, and especially in software. Like You meet with all of the tech teams, you meet with the product teams. Honestly, the only expectation they have when you're coming in is like, you would be preferred to have industry experience. So I was a waitress and I worked at a restaurant. So there was like, okay, so you understand the pain point of our product, which is huge for them. And then they just expected me to work my butt off to learn in the first 2 months of the job. I wasn't expected to write anything. It was just like, meet with the right people, do your reading, do your research, and eventually you'll get the hang of it. So I would do as much initial research on like the basic, very baseline, what the product is and what it does before getting super intimidated by like the technicalities of it and how exactly it works. And if you're really passionate about a product, or if you're like a little familiar with it, then you'd be surprised how you might get in.
That's good to know, and that's surprising. Okay, we have one last very important question. I'm just going to read this. How would you recommend or advise gaining experience as a writer, especially as a student, for professional context? Similarly, how would you recommend building a writing portfolio? Now, we're going to have a session, students, next spring on e-portfolios, but this is something I want them to talk about, not me.
Well, I can tell you what I did. As I mentioned, I was fortunate in that, so sometimes the jobs you're going to be in, if you want to be a writer, sometimes you just have to have a job to like pay the bills. So, and that's great. And I mean, when I was even an intern, I wasn't always given writing projects, but sometimes if you take the initiative to seek those kinds of projects out, first of all, it's really appreciated by the people around you, but it also gives you an opportunity to build your portfolio. So I would say be really eagle-eyed looking out for opportunities there, and also be thinking about all the different kind of things that can be part of a portfolio. It's not always a blog post or an article. I did like an email series. I also think I mentioned doing freelance work, and there's if you can get connected and work for a company and do freelance, you can do it that way. But there's also ways online to get connected to people who are looking for digital content, because it's huge right now and they need people to do that. So that's really what I did, and just collected everything that I ever did from the jobs that I've had. And as a student, like, you know, I would say that it's not necessarily expected for you to come out with a professional portfolio. If you have been an intern somewhere, have had time to do that, that's great. I think, for example, on my job, I had to do like a writing test to even get the job. So even if you give them a portfolio, they're going to make sure you can really actually still write. So I think my biggest piece there would be any kind of freelance opportunities, creating your own opportunities where you can, and that's not easy to do. But that's one way to do that.
Sarah, how about you?
So I agree with the freelance. There's a site called Watching America that takes international articles and translates them into English for kind of a compendium of a lot of different viewpoints of the news. And if you have basic familiarity with A&P and different citation styles, you can review the articles that these translators are writing to make sure that it sounds like fluent English. So that's one good one. And then places like Blogmutt, I think is the name, like one of those freelance sites where you can bid on different blog post opportunities. That's one, and just save those. And I do think academic writing is fine when you're coming out of college, just as an example of your capabilities. No one is going to say, oh, this role isn't for writing about Victorian literature. No, thank you.
Yeah. Chrissy, you had that whole wonderful collection of Verizon Twitter posts.
Yes.
Very clearly, Erin Penland had this client at Verizon, and Chrissy could magically write Twitter posts. This one on Twitter was like shorter, but you could get the tone, the content, right? So, I mean, is that something you could include in a portfolio?
It was, yes. And that's why my first job was all social media because, of course, that was all my portfolio was. I really didn't have anything aside from those social posts, but what I did have was my personal portfolio. And I've been told a few times that like they loved that because they could see my personality, which at a place like a startup or an agency where culture is huge. They were like, we got to see a little bit of you and who you are. And I had this baking blog that I don't keep up anymore that Dr. Oaks, Dr. Oaks is my only fan. But they loved seeing it. And I would just write about recipes. And so I wouldn't be too worried about a professional portfolio. But if you do have a blog or if you do want to start like something personal, I would say put yourself into that and show off your writing skills there. And you never know what you might get out of it.
And students, Scotty Bryan, one of our majors, who may be on this call, I'm not sure, is the new editor-in-chief of the Paladin. So writing opportunities there. We're going to talk about e-portfolios, but when you're going to the internship office to look at things, just search under writing, and any position in any field that can have you write, doesn't matter what it is going to help you along these lines and show the variety of the work that you can do. So it is now 8:31. So I'm going to be mindful of everybody's time on this busy evening and say thank you to all our student guests. Y'all may go. I guess if they want to stay and maybe ask some more questions, that's fine. Ladies, if you need to run away, that's perfectly fine. Thanks so much. We can hang out and talk for a minute. Up to you. But if let me see if any of the students want to ask any more questions, they can hang around and do that if they like. But thank you so much. This is so interesting. It's so gratifying. We let you guys go, and then some people we never hear from again, ever. And then like I got an email about a month ago from a student who was a philosophy major who's now a doctor. So, yeah, it's really fun. Somebody from we had students from South Africa for a while. I don't know if any of you were in school when we were doing that. And one of them emailed me recently. So, okay, student participants. Does anybody else want to throw a question up in the Q&A for our participants? Is anybody putting anything in the chat? Let me see. So, yeah, Haley says it's called Verblio.
Verblio, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not saying it pays great, but it is writing experience.
It's okay.
Professional writing experience.
That's okay.
Sometimes it pays okay for the time you put into it.
Yeah.
That's true. This isn't rocket science.
All right. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to close that out for a second. No, not that. I'm trying to mess with my Zoom here. Okay. Thanks, ladies. This has been recorded, and I should have asked you if that was okay with you first. Sorry. But the alumni office keeps these, and then we have them on file for students who might want to see them later. So, I promise you this is going to help students in the future as well. So thank you so much again.